Some patients don't just walk into the unit. They rearrange the entire energy of the room the moment they arrive. One shifts from tears to rage in seconds. Another smiles while planning to break every rule. Another demands the spotlight like it's oxygen. And one carries an ego so fragile that a simple no can shatter it. These are cluster B personality disorders. And if you're a nurse or psychology student, you will face them. Welcome back to the Psycho Nurse, where psychology meets the real-life clinical world. Today we're going deep: research, neuroscience, DSM-5 breakdowns, real stories, and everything nursing school won't tell you. Let's get into it. So, what exactly is cluster B? It's one of the three major clusters of personality disorders defined in the DSM-5. This cluster includes 4 disorders known for their dramatic, emotional, and erratic behaviors: antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorder. Here's a quick fact. Personality disorders affect about 9 to 15% of the population, with cluster B being the most commonly seen in psychiatric and emergency settings. So you will see this. To really understand these disorders, you have to look at the research. Attachment theory suggests that early childhood trauma, insecure attachment, and abandonment can lay the groundwork. Neurobiologically, we see things like an overactive amygdala in borderline personality disorder or reduced prefrontal cortex activity in antisocial personality disorder. Genetics also play a big role, with a 40 to 60% heritability in many of these conditions. And of course, environmental factors like abuse, neglect, and unstable parenting are huge contributors. These traits often start showing up in adolescence and then solidify in adulthood. Let's start with our first one, antisocial personality disorder, or ASPD. I call this one the calm storm with no conscience. I'll never forget a patient named Daniel. He arrived in handcuffs. He was calm, smiling, and polite. His charm was so smooth it almost made you forget why he was there. But when the officer leaned in and whispered, "Don't trust that smile," the storm behind the calm started to make sense. According to the DSM-5, to be diagnosed with ASPD, a person must be over 18 and have a history of conduct disorder before age 15. They also need to show at least 3 of the following: repeatedly breaking the law, deceitfulness, impulsivity, aggressiveness, a reckless disregard for safety, consistent irresponsibility, and a profound lack of remorse. So why do they act this way? Research points to some key brain differences. They often have prefrontal cortex dysfunction, which leads to poor impulse control. Low serotonin levels are linked to aggression, and an underactive amygdala means they have a low fear response. They just don't feel fear or guilt the same way others do. Behaviorally, this looks like someone who is charming but manipulative, constantly breaks rules, uses people as objects, lacks empathy, and lies with absolute confidence. As a nurse, your management strategy is critical. Stay neutral and don't give them an emotional reaction. Keep strict, clear boundaries and document everything. Do not negotiate with manipulative behavior and set consequences early. And most importantly, avoid being isolated with them. Next, we have borderline personality disorder, or BPD. I call this the emotional earthquake. A patient I knew named Maria wasn't dangerous. She was desperate. One moment she'd hold your hand like you were her lifeline. The next, she'd be screaming that you abandoned her just because you had to leave the room. This isn't manipulation in the way people think it is. This is emotional terror. The DSM-5 criteria for BPD paint a picture of intense fear of abandonment, unstable relationships, and a disturbed sense of identity. It includes impulsivity, recurrent self-harm or suicidal behavior, rapid emotional swings, chronic feelings of emptiness, explosive anger, and even paranoia or dissociation under stress. Neurobiologically, research shows an overactive amygdala, which creates those intense emotions. Low serotonin contributes to mood instability, and issues with the prefrontal cortex make it hard to regulate impulses. Critically, up to 80% of individuals with BPD report experiencing childhood trauma. It's like having your emotional skin completely removed. Every feeling is raw, and every slight feels like total abandonment. So how do you help? This is the most important part. You validate their feelings, but not their destructive behaviors. Set consistent, reliable boundaries. Encourage grounding techniques and coping skills. And try your absolute best not to take their emotional swings personally. If there's a risk of self-harm, a safety plan is essential. People with BPD don't want to hurt others. They want to stop feeling the intense pain of abandonment. Now let's talk about Histrionic Personality Disorder, or HPD. The spotlight as a lifeline. Tessa would enter the unit like she was stepping onto a grand stage. There was always drama, big emotions, grand stories. The second the attention moved away from her, her entire demeanor would shift. This wasn't because she was trying to be manipulative, but because for her, being unnoticed felt like being invisible. The DSM-5 criteria include a pervasive pattern of attention-seeking and excessive emotionality. This can show up as provocative behavior, shallow emotions that shift quickly, using physical appearance to draw attention, and speaking in a dramatic, impressionistic way. They often exaggerate the intimacy of their relationships. Psychologically, this often stems from a childhood where love and attention were conditional, only given for a certain performance. This creates a deep-seated need to be seen to feel valued. So, as a nurse, you want to keep your communication calm and neutral. Don't reward the drama with more attention. Instead, reinforce grounded, calm behavior. Set clear boundaries, especially around physical contact, and gently redirect conversations from theatrics back to facts. Remember, HPD is driven by a fear of being ignored. Finally, we have Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD, the fragile royalty behind the armor. A patient named Joshua demanded special treatment for everything: special food, special attention, a special room. He believed he was entitled to it. But the moment you challenged that entitlement, you could see him crack not with a big explosion. But you could feel the fragile self behind the armor shatter. The DSM-5 criteria for NPD include grandiosity, fantasies of unlimited power or success, a belief that they are special, and a constant need for excessive admiration. They often feel entitled, exploit others, lack empathy, and can be incredibly arrogant. When criticized, they often become enraged. Research suggests that this grandiosity is actually masking a very fragile self-esteem. There are also findings pointing to an overactive reward system in the brain and underactive empathy circuits. This often develops from childhood environments with either excessive praise or harsh criticism, where love was conditional. For nurses, the key is to not challenge the ego directly. Set firm, neutral boundaries. Avoid getting into arguments because it will just become a power struggle. Use facts, not emotions in your communication. Treat them respectfully, but without enabling their sense of entitlement. A narcissistic injury can trigger intense rage or complete withdrawal, so tread carefully. So why does Cluster B feel like such a storm on the unit? It's because all four disorders share that emotional intensity: impulsivity, dramatic interactions, and relationship chaos, but each storm has a different origin. For SPD, it's a broken moral compass. For BPD, it's like having no emotional skin. For HPD, identity is shaped by attention. And for NPD, it's a fragile ego hiding behind grandiosity. When you understand the origin of the storm, you can understand the behavior. Let's do a final high-yield review for all the students watching. ASPD, manipulative, no remorse, rule breaker. Think prefrontal cortex dysfunction. Your tools are firm boundaries and safety protocols. BPD, intense fear of abandonment, emotional swings, self-harm risk. Think amygdala hyperactivity. Your tools are validation and DBT-informed communication. HPD, dramatic attention-seeking. Think childhood attention instability. Your tools are a neutral tone and reinforcing grounded behaviors. NPD, grandiose but fragile. Think conditional attachment. Your tools are firm boundaries and fact-based communication. If you want to truly understand mental health, you don't run from the storm, you learn to read it. I'm the Psycho Nurse, and this has been your masterclass on Cluster B personality disorders. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. There's a student out there who really needs this.